Well, hello again everybody. Today's efforts in the workshop, it's been quite a day of it, but there hasn't really been much worthy of doing any video in really. It's just been sort of tedious, monotonous, grinding valves into cylinder heads. So nothing really to sort of show or share on the work front today. So I thought, as I've been involved with a few of my own bikes in recent times, and especially this Scrambles Cub, as I call it, replica, that's just about completed now. There's a few little bits and pieces I'll probably fiddle about with on it. I thought I'd tell the story of a sports cub that I owned. I bought it, I think I was about 14 years old when I bought it. I got it from the same place as I got my 1958 Tiger Cub, which was the first one. There was a few brothers who lived on a farm, and a couple of them had Tiger Cubs, and I bought one off one brother and one off another one. And the sports cub was never really a runaway success for me, but hopefully I printed off a picture, a copy of a photograph. You might see me on it there, I hope. And I would have probably been about between 14 and 15, I guess, when that photo was taken. And it looked better than it was. It was okay. I enjoyed it, taking it around the fields and around the forestry roads and stuff like that. But there was always something going wrong with it, and it didn't charge, and there was lots of little niggles. And in the end, I just sort of cast it to one side with quite a few bits and pieces taken off it, because I had, I think, another Tiger Cub field bike by then, and so this gradually was getting plundered for bits and pieces for a couple of the others, because I think I owned probably 3 or 4 Tiger Cubs by the time this one was sort of getting a bit too much to bear. So it got put away and stuck in one corner in the shed, and there's still a lot of it here today. A couple of my other Tiger Cubs, even this one I think may have the odd bits and pieces from it, but I managed all that time, I kept the frame. And interestingly enough, when I bought this off the guy, I asked him if there was a logbook, and he said no, because my 1958 one I bought off his brother, I got a logbook for, and that is currently, you know, it's all on the database and on the road and everything. Well, recently I just did some idle sort of looking up on the internet on the database, and I remembered the registration number of this bike, and I typed it in, and I thought, wow, it came up. It was on the system. So I got the relevant paperwork, and because I've got the frame, I was able to fill in the part on the paperwork where you had to put the frame or chassis number. And the upshot of it was, I think it was last year, for the first time ever in my ownership, I got a logbook for this. So I may well be digging that frame out and trying to put something together in the future. But anyway, this is all about from when I gave up on it, and an older lad at school who was, shall we say, rather persuasive, although I got on with him okay. He may well even be watching this video at some point. He decided that I was to sell him this sports cub. He caught wind of it, that I had it there and that it only had a few bits missing off it, and it could be got going again. So he came up and sort of more or less demanded that I sold it to him, and if not, you know. Anyway, I said, well, you know, I've taken bits off it now. There's no battery on it. There was no top on the carburettor, because I'd taken that off. There was no clutch cable on it either. But I'd read in the manual that without a battery, if you join the positive and negative leads that go to the battery together and switch the ignition to emergency, the thing should start. So I told him, well, what we'll do then, and I honestly didn't know that things were going to work out this way. But what I did is I said, well, look, we got a hill by the house. I said, we got no clutch on it. We got no throttle slide, no top on the carburettor. The best thing we can do is join the wires together and turn the petrol on. And what we'll do is we'll stick it into second gear. You get on it and I'll give a good hard push and it'll get going. And bear in mind, the ignition key lives on the left-hand side of the bike, just sort of beneath your thigh, above the toolbox then. So I told him that what he would have to do is basically, if and when the engine started, the only control he had over it was switching the ignition on and off. So yeah, he took all that on board. And I said, right, we ready for the off then? Yeah, give it a shove, he said. So down the hill we shoved it, and sure enough, it fired up. Well, with no throttle sliding at all, the revs on it were astronomical, and I'm sure the thing wheelied downhill in second gear when it caught. And at the bottom of the hill, there's a nice 90-degree right-hand bend. So he took off down there, roaring away. It sounded like a speedway race. It sounded like a speedway race with all 4 speedway bikes going, actually. And he took off at the speed of many antelopes into that corner. And, of course, the key fell out because it was on a bit of string hanging. It was tied to the frame. But he reached underneath, but there was no key there. So it carried on roaring and screaming away. Anyway, he laid it down on a 90-degree bend. And the next thing was, it looked a bit like, you know, those Tom and Jerry cartoons. What's the Tasmanian Devil is the other one, isn't it? Where everything's spinning around really fast and it's a blur. Well, all I could see was red of the bike. He was wearing a blue cagoule thing, which is sort of a bit like that, but with a hood on it and like cord here and a feeble zip. Well, all I could see from the top, there's all this yelling and screaming, which I could just about make out over the roar of the engine as everything went round in a blur. And the next thing, there were bits of blue getting flung into the air. Well, that was his clothes, that was his jeans and his cagoule getting torn to shreds by the wheel and the chain, actually. And it carried on. I ran down the road to try and do something, and it was just all going round so fast, there was no way I could get at anything. But eventually laid on its side, of course. The petrol ran out, and the machine stopped and died. And our hero, he staggered up, and I'm sure he must have been trying his hardest not to cry. He was cut and battered and bruised. His clothes were shredded, and big holes in the legs of his jeans, and the cagoule had been torn. Luckily, the 2 little cordy things didn't get caught in it, otherwise it could have strangled him or cut his throat. But he decided, after not much thought at all, that after all he didn't want a sports cub. And I think he had something like about 9 miles to limp home. And I saw him a few weeks later, and he bought himself an NVT Rambler. Very civilised, and I've still got this. So, happy ending of sorts, and he lived to tell the tale. Nothing broken, nothing damaged permanently, except maybe his pride for a little while, but I got to keep my bike. So there's the story of the reluctant sports cub.